Hello, and thank you for choosing this clean historical Western romance by Emma Ashwood. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep sharing more wonderful stories for free. So grab a cozy spot, kick back, and let this story whisk you away to a different time and place. Enjoy. Copyright Emma Ashwood. The Tragic Twin Brides by Emma Ashwood. Chapter 1. A slight nip in the air was evident as Sophia and her twin sister Charlotte walked back to their townhouse. Fall would arrive early, and Sophia wasn't particularly impressed with the cooler temperatures or the shorter days. The Adams girls hurried to get home before the sun went down, knowing their aunt would not be pleased with the idea of two young women out after dark, unchaperoned. Aunt May had always been on the strict side, but she was the only family the girls had left in the world, and she hadn't been feeling well lately. They didn't want to add to her stress by being late. Aunt May was their father's aunt. Even though she was over 50, when their parents died suddenly of influenza, she hadn't thought twice about taking in the two 8-year-old girls and providing them a home. She devoted her life to her nieces and did her very best to teach them how to behave like proper young ladies. Thanks to Aunt May, they'd had the finest education and were well accepted in Albany's upper-class social circles. At 18, the young women turned heads wherever they went. They were identical in appearance, but they were also very pretty. With their auburn hair and bright green eyes, suitors were constantly calling, but none could get past Aunt May. She was very particular and found flaws with each and every one. Sophia didn't mind her aunt's pickiness. She was grateful for it. Marriage wasn't particularly alluring to Sophia. She didn't really want to be some man's wife. Aunt May had done just fine without a husband and had complete control of her own life and finances. Sophia fully intended to follow in her footsteps, but Charlotte was a romantic at heart. Charlotte's anxiousness to find a husband and start a family of her own worried Sophia. Charlotte had always had her head in the clouds, while Sophia tried to constantly keep Charlotte in check. Even as children, it was always up to Sophia to make sure her twin remembered how to behave, and Aunt May's strictness tended to only cause Charlotte to long for a home of her own all the more. They were almost at the house when Charlotte started one of her rants. If Aunt May weren't such a prude, we could have stayed a little longer. This was probably the last garden party of the season, and we are missing the best part. Don't say such a thing about Aunt May. Be respectful, Sophia reprimanded. She hated Charlotte speaking ill of anyone, but it really bothered her when she spoke poorly of their aunt. You're always telling me what I should say or what I should do, Sophia. Honestly, sometimes you're just as much of a prude as she is. Being a few minutes older doesn't give you permission to mother me. I wouldn't have to mother you if you'd act like the lady you were raised to be, now would I? What would Mother say? If Mother was here, she wouldn't chase all of the gentlemen away who came to call. Sophia, we are grown women. It's time for us to marry and start our own lives. With Aunt May constantly chasing the suitors away, how is that ever supposed to happen? She knows better than we do. We should trust her, Sophia said firmly. If I leave it to Aunt May, I'll be an old maid, or worse yet, Charlotte lowered her voice, a thornback. Now you're just being crude, Sophia scolded. She hated the term thornback, and Charlotte knew it. Thornback was such a terrible word, and calling a woman over 26 such an ugly name simply because she wasn't married was disgraceful in Sophia's opinion. She gave her sister a stern look as they walked into the house. Let's not fight. Aunt May won't approve, and she doesn't feel well enough to scold us. Charlotte said no more on the subject, and Sophia was grateful. She and her twin were usually very close. 70%. They only argued when Charlotte was in one of her moods, and thankfully, the moods didn't come often. Sophia knew this particular mood was triggered by the announcement of Michael Talbert's engagement. Charlotte had liked him better than most of the young men who'd come to call, but Aunt May had not approved. Seeing Michael with his fiancée, Elizabeth, at the party hadn't made her at all happy. The girls were greeted by their maid, Ruby, when they entered the foyer. Ruby was older, probably close to their aunt's age, and she had been part of the household since before the girls moved into their aunt's home. She held a tray and was headed for the staircase. "Your dinner is on the table," she said. "I'm taking dinner up to your aunt. She's had a difficult day. She wants to see you when you've finished your meal. Try not to keep her waiting." "Yes, Ruby," the girls said in unison. They walked directly to the formal dining room and took their seats. Sophia glanced over at the empty seat at the head of the table. It was rare that Aunt May felt well enough to join them for meals. Sophia hoped it wouldn't be much longer before her aunt fully recovered from the bout of pneumonia that had kept her down for so long. She'd fallen sick in May, and while she had recovered from the initial illness, her strength had not returned. She had her good days, but they were few and far between. She mostly stayed home. At least a few days of each week, she felt too poorly to even leave her room, but she kept insisting she would be better soon. Charlotte seemed to be in a better mood by the time the girls moved on to their dessert. Ruby's apple pie was one of her favorites, so Sophia assumed the freshly baked pie helped to a certain extent. Once the meal was finished, the girls thanked Ruby for their meal, which Aunt May had instilled in them from the beginning. They then ascended the stairway to the large bedroom at the end of the hallway that was their aunt's. The drapes were already drawn, and the only light in the room came from the lamp beside Aunt May's bed. At first, Sophia thought she was already sleeping, but then Aunt May's hand came up, motioning for them to come closer. The girls quietly made their way across the room and knelt beside their aunt. "My sweet, precious girls," Aunt May said, her voice raspy, "you've grown into such fine young women right before my eyes. Your parents would be so proud of you." "Thank you, Aunt May," Sophia said softly. "There's so much I need to tell you, and I'm not sure where to begin," Aunt May said. "Wait and tell us when you feel better," Sophia said. "You should rest." "This can't wait any longer. It's waited far too long already, my sweet child. The doctor came to visit while you were out today," Aunt May said, pausing to take Sophia's hand in her own and motioning for Charlotte to take her other hand. "I don't have much time left. The doctor says my heart is weak." "Aunt May," Charlotte whispered, "please don't say that." "The doctor has to be wrong," Sophia said firmly. "We'll get another opinion." "He isn't wrong, and today was not the first time he's said it. It's just the first time I've believed him. I'm dying, girls, and I want to tell you what I think you should know. It has been a difficult few years, and I haven't made the best decisions regarding some financial ventures. I've had to rely on the money your parents left to keep up the house and provide for our needs. I hoped matters would improve, and I would never have to tell you. But the money is almost gone. It won't be easy for you, but you will have to make some arrangements for yourselves. You must promise me you'll stick together and look out for each other." Geraint. "We will, Aunt May, but what should we do?" Sophia asked. "You are very resourceful, young ladies. You'll find a way. I'm only sorry I won't be able to help you. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. I'm so weak. I need to rest now." The girls kissed their aunt on the cheek and quietly slipped out of the room. Sophia's heart was heavy, and she knew Charlotte's heart was breaking too. Even though it was still early, they went to their shared room and prepared for bed in silence. How could affairs have become so bleak without any warning? What were they to do without Aunt May? Chapter 2. There would be no morning conversation with Aunt May. She passed away silently during the night. Ruby stayed with the twins through the funeral and for a further week before moving on to take up employment with another family. Losing Ruby so soon after losing Aunt May was difficult for the girls, but Aunt May hadn't been exaggerating about the seriousness of their financial situation. They had almost nothing left. Sophia was the one to let Ruby know they could no longer afford to keep her on, and Ruby had cried with the girls as they helped her to pack her belongings. She kissed each of them on the cheek as she told them goodbye. Without Ruby to care for the house, the girls found themselves very busy. They'd never been required to do household chores, and they honestly didn't realize how much the maid had done for them until the task suddenly fell on their shoulders. Within a few weeks, the bills started to pile up. Their aunt had left considerable debts, and the girls weren't sure what to do about them. They sat at the dining room table and stared at the bills and their aunt's financial ledgers, trying desperately to come up with a solution. "We could sell some items," Charlotte suggested. "As much as I hate to part with the grandfather clock, I'm sure it would bring in some money." "We'll have to sell plenty more to bring in the kind of money we need," Sophia said, a frown on her face, "and I don't think even that will be enough." "We need husbands," Charlotte said. "If only Aunt May hadn't discouraged all the suitors. Now that our financial predicament is so public, none of the young men who were interested in us will even consider us as potential wives." "It's time for us to consider seeking employment," Sophia announced. "We need a stable income or we will lose the house. We'll start looking in the morning. Surely someone will hire us. We're strong and healthy." "What kind of work can we do? I don't want to work for one of the families we know, and we're only just learning to care for our own home. We aren't capable of caring for anyone else's house." Sophia crinkled her nose. The idea of working as household staff didn't sit well with her, and Charlotte wasn't wrong about their potential suitors. Almost everyone in their social circle had seemingly abandoned them once word got out that the money was spent. They had very few options. "We'll go to the dress factories. They hire women with sewing experience, and that is one skill we have in our favor. Aunt May believed all young women should know how to sew." Charlotte grimaced. "I guess we don't have much choice at the moment, but I will not work in the factory for the rest of my life. We'll do what we have to do for now, but there has to be a better way. I'm going to find it." The next morning, the girls got up early and wore their plainer dresses to walk across town to the industrial district. Sophia led the way through the office door, only allowing herself a brief glimpse of the women already working in the large room. They were greeted by a man around the age their father would be had he survived. He was a fairly handsome man, despite balding. He wore a fine suit, but Sophia could tell he wasn't born to money. He simply bore a different air to the older men they knew through Aunt May. Aunt May had never been very fond of those she considered the new rich, saying they lacked the sophistication that came with a good education and proper upbringing. Sophia wasn't sure about that, but she was sure they needed jobs. "I'm John Tucker. This is my factory. What can I do for you, ladies?" the man asked. "We're looking for employment." Sophia hoped to sound more confident than she felt. "My name is Sophia, and this is my sister Charlotte. By the looks of you, I'm guessing you're twins. We don't see many sets of twins around here. We work long hours. Is there anyone at home who isn't going to approve of you spending too much time at work?" Sophia shook her head. "No, sir. It's just my sister and me. Our aunt recently passed away, and we need work. I'm always looking for young women who know how to use a sewing machine. We'll give you a try and see how you do," he said. "I have to admit to hoping you will do well. You're two of the prettiest young women I've had walk through these doors." Charlotte giggled slightly at his comment, and Sophia was instantly appalled. Charlotte had two very distinct laughs. One was used when Charlotte found hilarity, while the other was meant to be flirtatious. The giggle that escaped her sister's lips when Mr. Tucker complimented them on their beauty was most definitely the latter. Sophia knew she would need to speak to her sister about the appropriate way in which to behave in front of their new employer. But for now, she was just relieved they would have the means to provide for themselves. Chapter 3. Working at the sewing factory was grueling at times, but Sophia didn't really mind the work. It kept her mind off their circumstances. They had sold whatever they had of any significant value, so they were no longer in immediate danger of losing the house, provided their income remained constant. By the time fall turned to winter, Sophia had even made friends with a few of the young women at work. Charlotte seemed to be adjusting to their new lot in life to an extent, and Sophia was grateful. Her sister seemed to have a real knack for fashion. Even Mr. Tucker had noticed Charlotte's keen eye. He promoted her off the machines and onto designing the patterns. Charlotte thrived in her new environment, and Sophia was pleased her sister seemed to be finding her footing. Mr. Tucker's attention caused Sophia a little discomfort, but Charlotte constantly reassured Sophia that it was preferable for them that their employer take an interest in Charlotte's work. Sophia agreed in principle, but remained concerned nonetheless. From her perspective, Mr. Tucker's interest in Charlotte extended beyond her professional abilities, and she feared Charlotte's mind might be wandering toward romance. Sophia's fears were confirmed one evening in early December. She had visited a coworker who had been sick and so arrived home later than usual. The sound of a man's voice in the parlor startled her slightly, only to be exacerbated when it was followed quickly by her sister's laughter. Sophia walked into the room to find Mr. Tucker and Charlotte sitting in front of the fireplace together, much closer together than Sophia deemed to be appropriate, which only added to Sophia's discomfort. "Sophia, you're finally home." "John and I were beginning to worry," Charlotte said. "I was checking on Sally. I took her some of the soup we made. She's feeling much better," Sophia said, trying to cover her surprise. "Good," John contributed. "I'm glad Miss Jones is on the mend. I hate to hear that one of my employees is sick." "You're such a compassionate employer, John," Charlotte gushed, placing her hand on John's as she spoke. John held her hand loosely. "Thank you, Charlotte. I try to show kindness where I can. I should get going. It's getting late, and I'm sure you ladies are tired. I'll bring the carriage around on Saturday afternoon, and we'll see that show. Enjoy your evening." Sophia didn't bother listening to the rest of their brief conversation. She was too busy thinking over what she had just witnessed. Although it was entirely inappropriate, neither of the two seemed the least bit embarrassed. She dreaded the conversation she would have to have with Charlotte, and, not for the first time, she wished her aunt was still here to set her sister straight. Once Mr. Tucker had said his goodbyes and the girls were alone, Sophia followed Charlotte into the kitchen. "Why was Mr. Tucker in our home?" she asked. "He offered to bring me home in his carriage. Isn't he kind?" Charlotte said as she set the table with 2 plates. "Don't you think it inappropriate? He was in our home alone with you." "That isn't exactly his fault. We had no idea you weren't here for the longest time. I didn't know you planned to visit Sally this evening." "I know I mentioned my plans this morning." "Really? I must have forgotten. It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. John has all but declared his intentions anyway. It won't be long before he proposes, and then all our troubles will be over. With John's fortune, we won't have to worry about losing the house or working any longer in that factory. Once we marry, he'll look after both of us. I'm sure of it," Charlotte said. "Charlotte, are you sure this is wise?" "We are managing fine on our own. You should marry for love, not security," Sophia said softly, hoping she could make her sister understand the seriousness of the situation. "Oh, Sophia, I think I might love him. He's so different from the boys who've come to court in the past. John is a real man who understands the way the world works, and he doesn't come from money. He earned it through working hard. He's so intelligent, and he treats me like a woman, not a silly girl. Please try to see the bigger picture. John's been showing me how the world works, and it isn't at all as Aunt May taught us. He wants to help us. This is quite possibly the best eventuality for us." Sophia didn't know how to respond to her sister's comments. It was obvious that Charlotte was smitten. She decided it might be best to keep her opinions to herself for the moment and hope that either Charlotte was right or that her sister figured things out before marrying the wrong man. They ate their meal in relative silence, other than Charlotte's occasional bouts of praise for Mr. Tucker, and Sophia excused herself to bed early. She had so much on her mind already. Charlotte's latest revelation only increased her worry. Through the winter, Charlotte spent all the more time with Mr. Tucker. Sophia's pleas for her sister to at least make sure their outings were properly chaperoned were in vain. The women at the factory started noticing the attention Mr. Tucker lavished on Charlotte, and soon her sister was the subject of idle speculation. They never spoke of it in Sophia's presence, but the manner in which they stopped speaking whenever she approached spoke volumes. By the time her friend Sally finally spoke to Sophia about the gossip, Sophia already suspected the worst. Charlotte was being labeled a loose woman, and she didn't even seem to mind. She just kept insisting to Sophia that none of it would matter once John proposed. Sophia almost wished he would get on with it, but Mr. Tucker didn't seem to be in any hurry. If he truly loved her sister, wouldn't he want to marry her and stop the gossiping tongues? The real problems began for the sisters near the end of January. Charlotte woke up ill. She was unable to walk to the factory, so Sophia had to go alone. She informed Mr. Tucker that her sister wouldn't be in that day, and he didn't seem very bothered by the news that Charlotte was sick. Again, Sophia found herself questioning Mr. Tucker's affection for her sister, but she continued with her work and rushed home to Charlotte when the workday was over. Sophia found Charlotte crying in her bed. She touched her sister's forehead to see if she had a fever, but she wasn't the least bit warm. "Charlotte, do I need to call the doctor? Are you feeling worse?" she asked. "I'm afraid a doctor won't be of any help this time. I think I know why I'm sick, Sophia, and I'm so afraid," Charlotte admitted, bursting into a fresh bout of tears. "What's wrong?" "I'm almost certain I'm in the family way," she confessed, covering her face with her hands. "What will John say? Aunt May would be so disappointed in me." Sophia closed her eyes. She needed to choose her words carefully. She didn't want to upset her sister further, but she was disappointed in her sister. The thought had crossed Sophia's mind that Charlotte might be engaging in inappropriate activities with Mr. Tucker, but knowing it was true was different from just suspecting it was possible. Finally, Sophia put her arm around her twin. "We'll talk to Mr. Tucker tomorrow. I'm sure he will want to do right by you and marry you. There will be talk. It can't be avoided, but I'll be right here beside you the entire time. Thank you. I don't know what I would do without you. I didn't expect this to happen. I'm sure John has just been waiting for spring to propose. And now I've gone and messed it all up," Charlotte said, leaning into Sophia's side. The sisters sat together in silence for the rest of the night. Sophia could only hope Mr. Tucker would do right by her sister quickly and avoid as much scandal as possible. Chapter 4. Sophia stood beside Charlotte in Mr. Tucker's office. She felt the tension rise within her as he stared at Charlotte in silence. It was obvious, at least to Sophia, that no words of love were going to be spoken. Finally, Mr. Tucker turned and walked to his desk. He sat in his seat and looked down at the papers he had been looking over when they arrived. "Ms. Adams, I am very disappointed in you. I never would have thought you the kind of woman who would try to sully a man's reputation in order to attain a better station in life. This is not my problem, nor is it my child. I have no intention of helping you out of your predicament. I'm not sure who has fathered this child, but I suggest you insist he marry you. I think it would be best for all if we forget this conversation ever took place," John said. "Please collect your things and leave my factory. You can both consider yourselves dismissed." "John," Charlotte whispered, "you know this is your baby." "I know no such thing," he said, anger evident in his tone. "Women in your situation are always out for themselves. You showed up at my door because you were desperate. How am I supposed to know your desperation hasn't driven you into the arms of many men? You were far too eager to get your clutches into me and push me to the altar. Now I think I see the reason. You wanted me to believe this baby was mine. Get your things and leave, or I will have you escorted out of here personally." Charlotte started to take a step towards him, but Sophia held her back. "We need to leave now, Charlotte. Making a scene isn't going to help. He isn't worth it. Think of the baby. You don't need this stress." Charlotte finally relented, and Sophia pulled her out of the office. Sophia helped her distraught sister into her coat and led her down the street. The walk home was one of the hardest undertakings ever, because now they knew they were truly alone in this situation. Without their positions at the factory, they would not be able to keep the house, and the baby was still coming. How would they support a child? Sophia had no idea what they should do, and she was sure Charlotte was too upset to help her find a solution. Once home, Sophia settled Charlotte into her bed. She knew her sister still didn't feel well, and she assumed she would need some time alone. Sophia quietly went through the house, straightening up as she went. She needed to take inventory of whatever remained theirs. none of which was of any substantial value, since those items had already been sold months prior. They barely managed to get by on the small income they'd been bringing in, so there were no savings. Sophia knew her sister couldn't be more than a few months along, but it was too late for her to find a suitor. Even if they could find a man willing to marry Charlotte immediately, it would be impossible to pass the baby off as his, and attempting to do so would make them guilty of exactly what Mr. Tucker had accused them of just hours earlier. What were they to do? The answer didn't come to Sophia until late in the night. They would have to give up the house. There was no way around it. Sophia would have to find work, of course, but no one would hire Charlotte in her condition. She doubted she would be able to find another factory job after the ordeal with Mr. Tucker. Maybe she could find work in a restaurant. She'd always enjoyed helping Ruby in the kitchen, and the idea of working for a family they once socialized with was no more appealing now than it had been only months earlier. Soon enough, her sister's condition would be impossible to conceal. She didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to Charlotte's baby by spending her days with people who knew their aunt. It was going to be difficult enough for Charlotte to leave their home for a boarding house. Charlotte had always loved the finer side that their parents and eventually their aunt had provided. Sophia loved the finery too, but she was rather more practical than her sister. She knew she could get by on much less. All that really mattered now was providing for Charlotte and the baby. All else could be worked out in time, of that Sophia was certain. Unable to sleep, she sat in the parlor sipping a cup of tea and browsing the newspaper. She was flipping through the classified advertisements in search of work opportunities when she came across the section for mail-order brides. A conversation she had with Sally a few months earlier came to mind. Sally was in no better position financially than Sophia and Charlotte. One Sunday afternoon, while they were enjoying a quiet visit, Sally had confessed to looking through the advertisements in search of a suitable husband. At the time, Sophia had been horrified that her friend would even consider marrying a stranger, but Sally had explained that it was a way out and a chance for a better life. In the end, Sally hadn't answered any of the advertisements. Sophia was grateful she didn't have to say goodbye to her friend, but now the idea didn't seem quite as outlandish. If she could find Charlotte a husband out west, Charlotte and her child could be protected. Her sister wouldn't have to stay in the city and be labeled a harlot. The baby would have a father. Sophia just needed to act quickly so Charlotte could be married before her little one made its arrival. After scouring the advertisements, Sophia was disappointed. None of the men she read about seemed right for her sister. Some were obviously much older, and after what Charlotte had just gone through with Mr. Tucker, they didn't seem like good matches. A few sounded much too good to be true, so Sophia immediately crossed them off the list. She had no interest in setting her sister up with a widower who already had several children of his own. Charlotte would have her hands full enough with her own baby on the way. Finally, she put the paper aside and retired to bed. Charlotte was asleep, but Sophia's mind continued to reel. There had to be someone out there who would be a good match for her sister. She just needed to find him and convince Charlotte it was the only way. Chapter 5. Cole Williams could smell the bacon frying before he walked into the large kitchen of his house. Mabel had probably started preparing breakfast about the same time he and his right-hand man, Tom, had left to see to their morning chores. The animals of Mapleview Ranch always ate first. That's the way his father had done it, and Cole saw no reason to change the routine now that he was in charge. Tom Smith had been his father's best ranch hand since Cole wasn't much more than a boy, and Cole saw no reason to change that either. The man was a good 10 years older than Cole, but he treated him with the same respect he'd always shown Cole's father. Everyone had loved David Williams. He was one of the most well-respected men in their particular part of Montana while he was still alive, and Cole was proud to be his father's son. David and Cole's mother, Mary, built Mapleview Ranch from the ground up, and they built the little town of Mapleview right along with it. Losing his father 3 years earlier hadn't been easy on Cole. He'd been 23 at the time, so he wasn't a child, but he didn't feel ready for the responsibility he inherited just yet. Now, at 26, he knew he'd grown into a man his father could be proud of, and he was grateful for it. Cole removed his hat and tried to smooth down his unruly black hair before sitting at the table. His ma would come out of her grave and skin him alive if he tried to wear his hat at the table. Of course, she wouldn't have to since Mabel would skin him before his ma had the chance. Tom might be his right hand, but Mabel Jones ran the house. The boys knew better than to cross her. She was about the same age as his mother, and she'd come to work at the ranch after losing her husband. Mabel and his ma didn't stand on formalities. Ma had never treated Mabel as an employee. She had always been her friend, and Cole learned early that he had better treat the woman who cooked all his meals with respect. "Did you think about my suggestion?" Mabel asked, as she set a plate of piping hot biscuits on the table. "Which one?" Cole asked, feigning ignorance. He knew where this conversation was going. "Cole Williams, you promised your mother on her deathbed that you'd find yourself a wife. It's been nearly a year since she passed, and you have made no effort at all. Did you think about my suggestion about the advertisement?" "I thought about it, Mabel, but I don't think I want some stranger from the East whom I have never even met coming into our lives," he said. "It'd be easier if I could just meet some nice local girl." "Easier?" "Yes, but we've been over this, Cole. You've waited too long. It's not like there were many girls near your age in Mapleview in the first place, and most of them are already married. You found something wrong with the ones who are single, and it's time for you to settle down and start a family," Mabel said firmly. "You don't have to marry the first girl who answers your advertisement. Take your time, choose carefully, and get to know her. You need someone to look after you." "I have you to look after me, Mabel," Cole said, flashing her the innocent grin that always got him out of trouble when he was a boy. "It's not the same, and you know it. You need a wife, and it's time you got one. I'm not getting any younger. I have no intention of taking care of you boys forever. Unless you want to suddenly find yourselves cooking your own meals, one of you needs to get married. Tom here is going to need to learn manners before he can find a wife, but your ma raised you right, Cole. I want you to place that advertisement when you go into town tomorrow." Cole looked over at Tom for help, but Tom pretended to be too busy eating his breakfast to pay any attention. He looked up at Mabel. She had her hands on her hips and a stern look on her face. She wasn't going to let this go until he agreed. "I'll put an advertisement in the paper, but I can't make any promises past that. I want to keep my promise to Ma, but I won't marry the wrong woman just to get you off my back. Marriage is serious. If I'm going to stand before God and promise to stand by a woman for the rest of my life, she's going to have to be someone I can keep that commitment to without constantly feeling like I made a mistake." "Fair enough," Mabel said. "Now eat your breakfast before it gets cold. I need you out of my kitchen so I can get to my housework." Cole ate quickly and headed back outside. Tom wasn't more than a few steps behind him. "She's right about one thing," Tom said. "You did let all the good local girls marry before you were ready to commit to anyone. The choices you have left aren't the kind of woman your parents would want you to marry." Maybe Mabel's idea isn't so foolish. There are a whole lot more women back east than there are around here. "I just don't want to choose the wrong one. What kind of woman would be willing to leave her family to marry a stranger? I promised Mabel I'd take out the advertisement, and I promised Ma I'd find a wife. I plan to keep both those promises, but whoever I marry needs to be a good, honest woman whom Ma and Pa would have liked. I know I'm picky, but running the ranch isn't the only responsibility they left me. I need a woman who can be what Ma was to the community. She must be honest, kind, and godly. She can't be afraid of hard work, and she needs to be a woman who the people in town will respect," Cole said. "That's a pretty tall order, and a whole lot of responsibility to put on a woman. Maybe you should just look for a woman you can love and who'll love you in return," Tom said. "Of course, what do I know? I'm a bachelor, and I plan on staying one for as long as possible. You're the fool who promised he'd get himself a wife." Tom laughed and hopped on his horse. He gave it a swift kick and took off for the back pasture. Cole grinned and shook his head before mounting his horse and following his friend. They had work to do. He'd worry about what to say in his advertisement when the day was done. Chapter 6. It didn't take long for Sophia to find work in a local restaurant that went by the name of Donovan's. It was a family-owned place, and the Irish immigrants who ran it took her under their wings. Mrs. Donovan was getting older and needed extra help in the kitchen. She showed Sophia what she needed her to do, and Sophia was a quick learner. The pay wasn't very good, but Sophia got to take leftovers home at the end of each day. Since Charlotte seemed to be having a difficult pregnancy and spent most of her time feeling slightly unwell, the leftovers meant Sophia didn't have to worry about keeping her well-nourished. They no longer had the house, and the boarding house they found wasn't ideal. Breakfast and dinner were provided, but neither meal was particularly substantial. They did have a little money left after selling their remaining possessions, but that wouldn't last long. There were decisions that needed to be made, and Charlotte wasn't much help in the decision-making process. Besides being sick most of the time, she had slipped into a serious depression. Sophia knew it was probably as much her sister's guilt as Mr. Tucker's betrayal that was causing her so much pain, but she wasn't sure how to help. Sophia continued to look through the mail-order bride advertisements each week. She hadn't told Charlotte her plan yet. There was no reason to mention it until she found a suitable candidate, and Sophia hoped her sister's heart would mend enough to consider her proposal. On her way back to the boarding house, Sophia picked up yet another newspaper. She opened it to the classifieds as soon as she and Charlotte had finished their meal. She'd read almost all the advertisements when one caught her attention. Rancher with means to support a wife and family, looking for a wife. Must understand the importance of family and friends and be willing to relocate to Montana. The ideal candidate must be well-raised and educated. Anyone who cannot treat the hired help with respect need not apply. Sophia reread the advertisement a few times, trying to glean as much information as possible. He was a man with money who cared about family. This was good. Maybe he would be willing to accept the baby and would even consider letting Sophia come along, or at least visit. A ranch would provide a safe place on which her niece or nephew could grow up, and Charlotte was most certainly well raised. Aunt May saw to that personally. Sophia had never seen Charlotte treat Ruby with anything but the utmost respect. Aunt May had instilled that in them as well. This could be the one. She just needed to convince Charlotte that her plan was a sound one and hope the rancher agreed. Time was getting away from them. They needed a husband for Charlotte as soon as possible. "Charlotte, we need to talk. Do you feel up to having a conversation about the baby?" Sophia asked. "I think so," Charlotte said, placing her hand on her slightly protruding waistline. "I guess there are things we should probably talk about before any more time passes." Sophia nodded. "I have an idea, and I hope you will at least consider it. Sally mentioned mail-order brides a few months ago. A considerable number of men out west are ready to marry and start a family. If we could find you a husband there, you and the baby would be looked after." "Out west? To a stranger? I know it isn't exactly the way you pictured it, but it might be your best option. What about you, Sophia? I don't think I could stand it if we were apart, and what man would want to raise another man's child?" Sophia bit her lip. "I'm managing fine here. I have found an advertisement for a man who seems to respect the importance of family, and if he were willing to let me come with you, I would be there to help." She paused and took a deep breath. "I don't think it would be prudent for us to mention the baby." "Not mention the baby? We are hardly able to hide the baby from my future husband. We wouldn't hide it per se. We just wouldn't mention the baby until he is desperately in love with you. You're charming, Charlotte. He will see that from your letters. Once he proposes, you can tell him about the baby, or what? You could wait until you arrive. Once you're there, I'm sure he won't send you away. The baby needs a father and you need a husband, Charlotte. If you stay here, your prospects of marriage are not good. I'm sure you realize how difficult it will be to find a husband under these circumstances." we won't be able to provide for your child. We can't even afford to start preparing for the little one now. It is your best chance." Sophia watched as Charlotte stood up and paced the small room. Charlotte was wringing her hands and tears filled her eyes. It broke Sophia's heart to see the pain Mr. Tucker's rejection had caused. Finally, Charlotte stopped pacing and sat back down on the bed beside her. "May I read the advertisement?" Sophia nodded and put the paper into her sister's hands. She pointed to the advertisement from the man in Montana and sat in silence as Charlotte read it for herself. "Do you really think there's a chance he might let me bring you with me? He implies family is important to him, so I have to believe he would extend that importance to his wife's family. And the baby? We can hope he would love the baby as his own. At the very least, hopefully, he would be willing to accept the child and meet its needs. I'm not sure I can write the letter. Will you do it for me? You can pretend to be me. If I were more myself, I could write to him, but I don't think I have the strength to actively pursue another man while my heart belongs to John. Oh, Charlotte, you must stop caring for Mr. Tucker. He doesn't deserve your loyalty. He is a terrible, spineless man. Please try to forget him." I don't know if it is as simple as just forgetting him. I honestly believe John cared for me. I never would have put myself in this position otherwise. I know he isn't the man I believed him to be, but I can't help my feelings. Please, Sophia, if you think this rancher from Montana is the best option we have, I need you to write to him. I'll read what you write, and I'll read his responses. I'll even do my very best to try to fall in love with him in time, but I need your help. I'll help you. I'll write the first letter. If he responds, maybe you will feel ready to write the next one. You should rest now. Once Charlotte was in bed, Sophia sat in the lone chair at the small rickety wooden table in their room and started writing. "Dear Mr. Williams, I found your advertisement for a bride in the newspaper, and it was the first one I seriously considered responding to. I will admit to having read several over the last few weeks. Until recently, I would never have considered finding a husband in such a manner. My name is Charlotte Adams, and I live in Albany, New York, with my twin sister, Sophia. You mentioned the importance of family, and I firmly agree that nothing is more important. My sister is the only family I have left in the world, and I love her dearly. We were orphaned at a young age and raised by our great aunt. She saw to it that we had a proper upbringing, so you needn't be concerned about whether or not I have been properly raised. We lost our dear aunt in the fall, and we still feel the loss keenly. Losing Aunt May changed our circumstances considerably. I'm afraid I no longer enjoy the privileged background I once could have boasted. Thankfully, we were already past our 18th birthday when we lost our aunt. I will be 19 in August, and my education is long since complete, so my sister and I were able to find work. We had to give up our house, but we found a boarding house in the city where we could live together. Writing to you was my sister's idea. She has no desire to marry, but she knows it is important to me to be married and have a family of my own. As for treating the hired help well, we had a housekeeper named Ruby for most of my childhood. She was like family to us. It was so hard to say goodbye to her after my aunt passed. Aunt May taught us from an early age to do as Ruby asked and not cause her any extra work. She insisted we show her the respect she deserved, and I could not imagine treating any hired hand differently. Having now worked to earn my keep, I see even more clearly the importance of Aunt May's instructions. It is probably presumptuous to ask this question since I don't even know if you will respond to my letter, but I feel compelled to ask anyway. If we were to decide we were a suitable match and you were to ask me to marry you, is there any way you would consider allowing my sister to accompany me out west? She would not get in the way, and I'm certain she could find work so as not to be a burden. I would prefer to have my only family nearby, but I can accept you not finding it agreeable if that is how it is to be. I would love to hear more about your family and your ranch if you choose to respond. Sincerely, Charlotte Adams. Sophia carefully folded the letter and put it to the side. She would have Charlotte read it over in the morning and then mail it on her way to work. If Mr. Williams would just choose to marry Charlotte, and he could be persuaded to allow her to accompany Charlotte out west, She could find work in a nearby town and not be separated from her sister. Chapter 7. Several weeks passed before Cole received the responses to the advertisement. Mabel had insisted he run in the paper, but when the letters started coming, there were plenty. He didn't open any at first. He just left them to pile up on the trunk in his bedroom. He was a little overwhelmed by the sheer number of women willing to leave their homes to marry a man they'd never met. How was he ever to find a suitable wife in this way? How could he be sure the woman he responded to was who she claimed to be? It wasn't until Mabel set the letters in front of him on the dinner table and stood there with her hands on her hips, silently insisting he read a few, that he actually got the courage to open the first letter. The first was from a girl in Boston, and her letter indicated nothing particularly special about her. The letters from the girls in New York City, Buffalo, and Baltimore held no allure either. He tried to leave the remaining letters for later, but Mabel wouldn't be put off. "These women took the time to write to you, Cole. You will not get up from this table until you've read every single letter," she said firmly. Cole looked down at the next envelope in line. It was postmarked Albany. Great, another letter from a city girl. He picked it up and opened it, pulling the letter out quickly to get it out of the way. As he started reading, he was a little surprised by what he found. This girl seemed different from the others. For starters, it was obvious that she had read his advertisement and responded to each of the requirements that he had stipulated. Most of the others had just ignored his words about family. A few even made it clear, unintentionally or not, that they wanted to get as far away from their families as possible. Not this woman, though. She didn't want to leave her sister. Cole found his heart going out to the young woman who had written the letter. She was younger than him and had also lost her parents. She seemed to see the importance of family. It was possible that family was even more important to her than it was to him. She mentioned her housekeeper by name, and he could see the pain she felt at no longer having the woman by her side. He could see her potentially warming up to Mabel. And he figured Mabel would mother her in the same way she always mothered him. Being an only child, Cole had always wanted a brother or sister. He thought about Charlotte Adams and her request to bring her twin out west with her and found the idea appealing. He was financially stable. There was no reason he couldn't provide a home for his sister-in-law. The letter mentioned how she had no desire to marry, but he knew the men of Maple View would likely work hard to change her mind. Even if they didn't, there was plenty of room in the house his parents had built to provide a home to this young woman if it pleased his wife to have her nearby. Even considering the possibility of taking Charlotte as his wife seemed foreign to Cole. He still knew next to nothing about this girl, but he thought he might like to find out more. Yes, this letter was indeed different. Cole handed the letter to Mabel. "Take a look at this one." Mabel read the letter. Cole waited and watched. He could tell she thought Charlotte Adams might be fit to consider by the way her lips curled up as she read. "I think you had best respond to this one. I'll get you a sheet of paper. You write to her before you go to bed tonight. I just hope this isn't one of the ones that's been sitting on that trunk for a week. You best not keep her waiting any longer. And if she's the one you choose, I expect you to invite her sister to join her. Your mother would have your hide if you didn't look after your in-laws." Once Mabel left him alone at the table, Cole reread the letter quickly before beginning his own. "Dear Miss Adams, I received your letter and found myself eager to respond. I'll admit that finding a wife in this way was not my first choice, but I promised my mother on her deathbed that I would marry. My housekeeper, Mabel, insisted I place the advertisement because she felt I was stalling. Let me assure you, I wasn't stalling intentionally. I just haven't found a woman around here who I felt was right for me. I'm a little older than you. I turned 26 in November. Both my parents have passed, but I did get to keep them with me for longer than you and your sister did yours. I have no living family, but I loved my parents a great deal. Family is very important. I'm sorry about the recent loss of your aunt, and I hate to hear how difficult life has been for you and your sister. My ma and pa wouldn't be very pleased with me if I didn't extend my hospitality to my wife's family. So if we decide to marry, you can rest assured your sister would be welcome to accompany you to Montana. You asked about Montana, so I suppose I should try to describe what life is like here. I own the Mapleview Ranch. I can't take much credit for its success. My father built it before he passed, but I do my best to keep it running. The town of Mapleview is small compared to Albany, but the folk are friendly. We have a general store and a few eateries. There's a sawmill and a school. The school is on the side of town closest to the ranch. It won't be a difficult walk for any children of mine to attend in the future. I see that you want a family of your own, and I'll admit I'd like to have one myself. Being an only child, I'd like to have a whole house full of them, if God allows. Speaking of God, I guess the question my folks would most want me to ask is about your own faith. Do you attend church in Albany? I think it's important for a family to attend services together, and I would rather not find myself unequally yoked. I await your reply. Sincerely, Cole. Cole sent the letter off with Tom the next morning and decided to leave the other letters unopened. Mabel didn't call him out on not reading the rest of the pile, and Cole took that as her seal of approval of Charlotte Adams. Mail between Montana and New York moved slowly, and by the time Charlotte's response arrived, Cole was busy with all the work that spring brought to the ranch. He was pretty tired when Mabel handed him the letter as he was sitting down to a late dinner, but he was also curious about what his potential wife might have to say. Dear Mr. Williams, I was pleased to receive your letter. I hope this letter finds you well. If I were being honest, I'd have to admit I was a bit surprised at your understanding of my desire not to leave my sister. It is a pity that you don't have the comfort of a sibling. I couldn't imagine losing my parents and not having my sister to lean on. Mapleview sounds like a lovely town. I've never lived anywhere but Albany, but sometimes it feels rather crowded. I expect life to be much different in Montana. I believe I could be quite content in a smaller town. I like that the school is within walking distance from the ranch, because, like you, I would love to have a large family. Being a wife and mother has always been my deepest desire, and if you decide that I am the right wife for you, I will do my best to be a good wife and a good mother to our children. You asked if I attend church. I attended regularly until my aunt passed, but the stigma of losing our wealth proved to be a burden. We were no longer accepted in the social circle we enjoyed before her death, so attending the church of our childhood was problematic. I have not found an appropriate place of worship since, but certainly would not be opposed to attending services with my husband. I look forward to hearing from you. It is so difficult to wait for the letters, but I will be patient. I only wish there were fewer miles between Albany and Mapleview so we could speak sooner. Sincerely, Charlotte Cole read the letter and had to agree with Charlotte's assessment. There was a good many miles between Albany and Mapleview. The wait for her response had been bothersome, and there was not much he could do about it. He wasn't quite ready to propose marriage just yet, but she did answer his question satisfactorily. He was annoyed by the manner in which their so-called friends had abandoned the sisters in their time of need, and vowed to stay awake long enough to write her another letter. He didn't want Charlotte to think he was not interested, because he thought he might be very interested in this particular woman. She needed someone, and he needed to be needed. Chapter 8. As spring turned into summer, Sophia became more and more anxious for Cole Williams to propose to Charlotte. Her pregnancy was progressing, and they needed a husband soon. Sophia was impatiently waiting for the mail, and she was annoyed that her sister had not taken over the correspondence yet. It felt increasingly more deceitful each time Sophia responded to Mr. Williams' letters. Charlotte was, at least, willing to marry the rancher if he ever decided to propose, but she wasn't willing to invest her time in getting to know the man who could be her husband. Whenever Sophia called her out on it, Charlotte only offered excuses. It certainly bothered Sophia more than she was willing to admit, and had they been in a less desperate situation, she would probably just have abandoned the whole notion. Facts were facts. This baby was coming and needed more than they could offer, and Mr. Williams had the means to provide stability. They needed to see this through to the end, even if it was becoming more of a deception with each letter Sophia wrote. She was not being intentionally deceitful. No, they hadn't mentioned the baby. They couldn't risk it, but Sophia did mostly write as Charlotte would have, had she felt more like herself. Charlotte did want a family, and she would do her best to be a good wife. Maybe Sophia wasn't entirely honest about the length of time since their last church attendance, but she was sure Charlotte would be willing to attend services with Mr. Williams since it was obviously important to him. The town of Mapleview did sound like a nice enough place. After some of their more recent experiences in Albany, Sophia had no desire to remain in New York. She was very grateful the invitation would be extended for her to go west once Mr. Williams finally proposed to Charlotte. Another worry on Sophia's mind was Charlotte's health. She didn't know much about pregnancy, but she suspected that most women did not have quite as difficult a time with it as Charlotte. With their funds so low and Charlotte being unmarried, they hadn't been able to see a doctor. Sophia was ready for this pregnancy to end and for her sister to feel better. She just needed to have all their ducks in a row before the baby arrived. Several letters passed slowly between Albany and Montana before the one they were waiting for finally appeared. It came in early July, and Sophia ripped it open before even arriving back at the boarding house. Dear Charlotte, we've written back and forth for a while now, and I think it is time we stop. There isn't much more we can learn about each other with so much distance between us. I think it is time to remedy that problem. I have enclosed train tickets for you and for your sister, departing July 25th. That should give you enough time to settle any matters in Albany that still require your attention. I hope I'm not being presumptuous, but I think we are thinking along the same lines. When you arrive, I propose you and your sister spend 2 weeks in the smaller house on our property with my housekeeper, Mabel. We can court properly during those few weeks and fully get to know one another. If you then accept this proposal, I would like to marry you. I should probably confess that I am usually much slower in making major decisions, but it bothers me that you are on your own and that you must work so hard to get by. I have become very fond of you, and I believe we could make a fine life together. Please send your answer as soon as possible, so I know you have accepted. Yours hopefully, Cole. Sophia took in a deep breath. Finally, he proposed. They had their way out of this terrible mess. She rushed home to share the good news with Charlotte. She burst through the door of their room and found her sister resting. Charlotte, wake up. He's proposed. We're going to Montana. Everything is going to be fine now. Here, read it for yourself. Charlotte slowly took the letter from Sophia's hand and read it silently. You did it, Sophia. You solved our problems. Thank you. I didn't actually believe your plan would work, but here we are. I promise I'll do my best to be the wife he needs. You'll be a wonderful wife, and we can be together. Everything is going to be fine, Charlotte. You'll see. Charlotte looked down at her stomach. And you believe he'll accept me once he finds out about the baby? You've read his letters. He's a good man. I'm sure he won't be happy at first, but he'll forgive you and help you raise your child. I just know it. I hope you're right. I want this to work. I want a clean slate far away from here. I really do. And you'll have it, Sophia assured her sister. We both will. Chapter 9. Time passed quickly for the girls as they prepared to leave for Montana. Charlotte found a little strength and managed to reinvent her well-worn dresses into outfits and items she knew her baby would need. She was revitalized in spirit somewhat, knowing she had managed to prepare in many ways. She worried Cole might be so angered by their deception that he would not accept her as his wife. But Sophia was so convinced things were going to work out well that Charlotte found herself beginning to believe her sister was right. Traveling by train for 6 days when 8 months pregnant was not a particularly pleasant experience. Charlotte ached everywhere. Even with Sophia's attempts to keep her comfortable, Charlotte was miserable throughout most of the trip. The constant jostling as the train glided over the tracks was almost unbearable at times, but she tried to remain as positive as possible. Sophia could be such a mother hen, and Charlotte didn't want her to worry. "I brought lunch," Sophia announced, returning to their seats with sandwiches. "I'm afraid it's the same as yesterday, but please try to eat. You need to keep your strength up." Charlotte gave her twin a weak smile and took the offered meal. "I'm sure I'll feel much better when we get to stretch our legs again. How is our money situation? Will we have enough to cover our expenses until we get to Mapleview?" "We should be fine. We only have another 3 days of travel expenses, and we've been very careful. I expect we will even have a small amount left when we get to Montana. Not much, of course." "You've done so much for me, Sophia. I'll never be able to repay you for standing by me," Charlotte said, tears filling her eyes. Sophia patted Charlotte's hand. "There's nothing to repay. We're sisters. You would have done the same for me." "Please don't cry, Charlotte. Everything is going to be fine now. You and the baby will be safe and comfortable, and we won't even have to be apart. I think Aunt May would be pleased with how we have managed to change our circumstances." "I'm not sure she'd be very pleased with me." "She wouldn't be pleased with Mr. Tucker. You can be sure Aunt May would have given him a piece of her mind. But Aunt May loved you. She would have understood your reasons, and she would have helped with the baby." Charlotte didn't respond. She wasn't completely sure what her sister said was true. She had made some mistakes, but she was going to think much more clearly in the future. This little one was depending on her, and she would not let her child down. Thanks to Sophia, they had a chance at a better life, and Charlotte fully intended to make the most of it. She just needed to get through the next 3 days of constant discomfort, preferably without complaining, and then things would be better. After their meal, the girls decided to try to rest for a while. Charlotte fell asleep fairly easily, but she didn't sleep long, thanks to a sharp pain in her back. She didn't want to wake Sophia, so she tried to readjust into a more comfortable position. Within a short time, she felt another pain. When the pains continued to hit at regular intervals, Charlotte began to get nervous. It was too soon for the baby to be born, but someone must have forgotten to mention that to the baby. When she was without doubt that the pains indeed indicated that the baby was on its way, Charlotte gently nudged Sophia. "Oh, Sophia, I don't think the baby is going to wait for us to get to Montana. I think it is coming now." Sophia's face went pale, to be immediately replaced by an expression of resolve. "I'll see if I can get help, Charlotte. Please try not to worry. I'm sure someone on the train knows what to do to help you. I'll be right back." Sophia quickly sprang into action, leaving Charlotte temporarily alone on their seat. Charlotte tried not to panic. She gently rubbed her abdomen. "Oh, little one, I wish you had waited just a little while longer," she said softly. Within minutes, Charlotte had returned with an older woman and a railway conductor. While the older woman spoke soft words of encouragement to the girls, the attendant tried to clear the crowded cabin to give them some privacy. Charlotte's pains were coming more frequently, and remaining silent was becoming almost more than she could bear, so she was grateful for the help her sister had found. She just needed to get through the next few hours, and then it would all be over. Chapter 10. Sophia swaddled her tiny nephew tightly to her chest. His face was almost as red as his hair. He was ever so fussy, but she didn't blame him in the slightest. It was a terrible day to be born, and the little boy seemed to instinctively know it. Sophia tried her best to comfort him, but she felt so empty inside. Her little nephew was finally born, but her sister was gone. It had all happened so quickly. One moment, Charlotte was holding her son in her arms, and the next, she was gone. The kind woman who'd come to help had done her best, but she wasn't a doctor. Why hadn't they just remained in Albany until the baby was born? Had Sophia not been so determined to get her sister married off before the baby arrived, maybe fate would have allowed it differently. Now Sophia was alone, and her little nephew was motherless. What was she to do? She looked down at the baby in her arms. She cuddled the baby in silence for a moment. "Don't cry, little one. I'm going to take care of you, I promise. I think you and I will be able to figure this out together." The baby seemed to settle at the sound of her voice, so she kept talking. First things first, you need a name. Your mother didn't ever want to talk about what she was planning to name you, so I guess it is up to me to choose. I think I'll call you Joseph. That was my father's name. It's a big name, but you'll grow into it. Everything will work out just fine, Joseph. I promise. Sophia continued talking to Joseph until he fell asleep. She was about to doze off herself when the conductor, who'd helped her the night before, arrived and nudged her gently. Ma'am, I thought I should inform you that the train will be stopping in River Falls in just a while. Some of the other men aboard are going to take your sister's body to the local funeral parlor. They'll be able to help you to make the arrangements. You won't have a lot of time, but I'll make do. Thank you for your kindness. I truly am sorry for your loss, he said before walking away. Burying her sister took almost all the money Sophia had left. She saved just enough money to buy milk for Joseph and feed herself for the remainder of her train trip. It was a terrifying feeling to be so poverty-stricken and have Joseph depend on her. She was in a terrible predicament, and she knew it. What would Cole Williams say when she arrived without his fiancé? Would he allow her and Joseph to stay long enough to make arrangements? Sophia wasn't sure how the man would respond once he learned Charlotte was gone, and Sophia knew she would need help. An idea started to form in her mind. What if Charlotte did arrive in Mapleview? Sophia could take her sister's place, and then maybe Cole would marry her and help her to raise Joseph. It would mean living a lie for the rest of her life, but she wouldn't have to worry about how to provide for Joseph. It would also mean becoming a wife, which she'd never intended for herself, but Sophia saw no other option. There was no decision to be made. Joseph needed a mother and a father, and she would make sure he got it. Charlotte would be the one to get off the train at Mapleview, and Sophia would no longer exist. Caring for a newborn on a train was tremendous work, so Sophia was exhausted by the time she arrived at Mapleview. She was very grateful for the porters who took pity on her and helped her to offload her trunks. It was a very hot day, and Joseph didn't seem to care for being warm. He was very fussy, and Sophia didn't immediately see anyone waiting to meet her. She was just beginning to become nervous when a tall, dark-haired man with a beard gave her a puzzled look. "Excuse me, miss," the man said. "I'm here to pick up 2 young women about your age. They should have been on the train with you." "Did you happen to meet Charlotte and Sophia Adams?" Sophia smiled. She had not been forgotten at the station. "I'm Charlotte Adams. My sister changed her mind at the last minute." The man gave her a puzzled look. He looked down at Joseph and then quickly back into her eyes. "Tom Smith, ma'am. I'm your—" He paused and looked back at the baby in her arms before continuing. "Fiancé's ranch hand. He apologizes for not being able to meet you himself. He sent me to bring you to the ranch. Are these your things?" Sophia was feeling rather self-conscious. Everything depended on Cole being willing to forgive the deception and accept the baby, and the look on his ranch hand's face filled her with worry. She couldn't stop now. She would just have to hope Cole was a forgiving man. "These are my things. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Call me Tom. I'll just load these into the wagon, and we'll get you settled, Ms. Adams." "Charlotte, call me Charlotte, please," Sophia said, trying to ignore the grief that bubbled inside her as she claimed her sister's name. They rode silently through town, and Sophia took the opportunity to look around. The town was quaint, and Sophia thought it was probably the homeliest place she'd ever seen. She saw the school Cole had mentioned in his letters. The schoolyard was empty, but Sophia could imagine Joseph playing there with his friends in a few years. He could have a good life here. Sophia just had to play her part. She could be her sister if it meant Joseph didn't have to go without. When they arrived at the ranch, Tom pulled up beside the smaller of 2 houses. "You'll be staying here with Mabel until the wedding. She's the housekeeper and cook around here. She's a little bossy, but we love her. I'm sure she'll take good care of you and the little one. She's probably busy in the main house right now, but she'll be around shortly. Cole will come to see you as soon as he gets back. I'm just going to carry your things inside, and then I will be on my way back to work." Sophia nodded. Tom offered Sophia a hand down from the wagon before getting her trunks. He showed her to the guest room and then left her alone in the house with the baby. Sophia took a few minutes to feed Joseph before trying to make herself presentable. Her nerves only increased as she waited to meet the man she was to marry. Chapter 11. Cole had never been more nervous in his life. The idea of finally meeting Charlotte face to face was overwhelming. He pushed his stallion a little harder than usual to get back to the ranch. He hoped she wouldn't be cross with him for not meeting her at the train station, but business required his attention that could not be attended to by his foreman. It was just bad luck that it had to be done today, of all days. Forcing himself to bypass the little house where Charlotte was likely waiting, Cole quickly went home to clean up and change into his Sunday best. No pictures had been exchanged, and Cole wanted to look his best. He knew he wasn't an unattractive man. The girls of Mapleview certainly hadn't thought he was homely, but Charlotte was from a big city. He wasn't sure how he'd measure up to the men she'd met in Albany. Of course, if she'd been interested in any of them, she wouldn't be here. He could tell from her letters that she was a good woman who was dealt a bad hand by life, and he wanted to make sure she never experienced anything harder than what the last year had brought her. Tom was still out in the field, so Cole didn't get the chance to ask any questions about Charlotte. Mabel was around, though, cooking up a feast in the kitchen. When Cole stepped inside, she gave him a once-over. "You clean up nicely, Cole. Go pick up your girl and bring her and her sister straight to the house. I've almost finished dinner, and we can't have it getting cold." "Yes, Mabel. I'll be back in just a few minutes." "Wait," Mabel said. "Take these flowers. I picked them earlier. I had a hunch you wouldn't think of it, but you should never show up to court a woman without flowers. Your mother wouldn't be very happy with me if I didn't keep you in check." Cole took the flowers and flashed a smile at Mabel. She wasn't wrong. His mother would have insisted on the flowers, too. "Thank you. Now get," she said, shooing him towards the door. "You've kept that poor young woman waiting long enough." Cole nodded and took off for the smaller house. It seemed right to meet Charlotte there. When his parents first started the ranch, his father built the small house for his mother with his own two hands. Cole hadn't been much taller than a grasshopper, but he'd followed his father step for step. He'd carried his father's tools and probably talked the older man's ears off while they worked. Cole still remembered the pride he felt when his ma said it was the most perfect house she'd ever seen. Even years after they'd built the main house, it wasn't uncommon for Cole to find his ma tending the flower beds there. She'd loved that old place, and he figured she'd be pleased about Cole using it for his bride-to-be over the few weeks before the wedding. Just walking the short, well-worn path made him feel just a little closer to his ma. Cole knocked on the door, and the woman he'd been writing to for months answered almost immediately. She was truly a beautiful girl. Her auburn hair was put up in a bun, but he could tell it was long. A few curls framed the side of her face, and Cole thought she looked not unlike an angel. He'd never seen a more attractive woman. "Ma'am, I'm sorry I kept you waiting," he stuttered. "It's nice to finally meet you, Cole. I'm Charlotte." Cole smiled and handed her the flowers. "I'm really glad you're here. I hated not being able to meet you and your sister at the train station." "It's quite all right. I understand how running a ranch of this size requires a lot of time. Most days aren't quite this bad, but I am grateful for your understanding. As much as I'd like to just sit here and talk with you for a while, Mabel has been working hard on a special meal, and she told me to fetch you ladies as quickly as possible." Cole noticed the downward turn of his fiancée's lips. "My sister decided not to join us at the last minute. I guess the idea of traveling so far must have made her a little nervous." "I'm sorry to hear that, but I am very glad you came. Shall we go?" Cole asked, offering her his arm. When she didn't accept it immediately, he started to worry. She bit her lip. "There's something I need to tell you before we go to the main house." Before she could continue, Cole heard a baby's cry. His eyes widened in shock as he followed the woman he intended to marry through the house to the guest room. When she lifted a tiny baby from the center of the bed, he realized the awful truth. "Who is this?" His name is Joseph, and he's my son. Your son? You didn't tell me you had a child. How could you lie to me, Charlotte? How could you keep such a secret? I brought you here because I thought you were a suitable woman to make my wife, and you show up with another man's child in your arms. What kind of a woman are you? Cole, please, I can explain. Ms. Adams, I'm not interested in your explanations. You came here under false pretenses, and as far as I'm concerned, you can leave. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered. If you'll just let me explain how desperate our circumstances were, then maybe we can start again. The time for those explanations has passed. I can't marry you. What were you even thinking coming here with an infant? He can't be more than a few weeks old. Joseph was born on the train. I thought I had more time. I wanted to explain before he was born. I never meant to hurt you. Well, you did. You can stay long enough to make other arrangements, but don't take too long. I'd rather not see you or your son in the meantime. I'll have Mabel bring you something to eat. No one goes hungry on Mapleview Ranch, but that is where my kindness ends. Goodbye, Ms. Adams. Cole turned on his heel and quickly exited the little house. He didn't go straight back to Mabel. He didn't have the courage just yet to admit he'd been fooled. Instead, he took off for the stables to think. What kind of a woman takes off to marry a man without even mentioning she was carrying another man's child? He thought about his parents. He had a responsibility to choose a wife they would consider worthy. They were so devout in their faith, and Cole always tried to live up to the standards they'd set for him. He couldn't marry a loose woman. It just wouldn't be proper. It would bring shame on the family name and cause his ma to turn in her grave. How could Charlotte put him in this position? Hadn't he made it clear in the letters how important it was his wife shared his faith? Yet here she was on his ranch with a newborn baby. What kind of mess had he gotten himself into? What would his parents think of him now? He'd been made a fool by this woman, and he just didn't know what to do about it. Chapter 12. When Cole's housekeeper finally arrived with the evening meal, Sophia feigned sleep, skipping dinner entirely. Her appetite had vanished after witnessing Cole's cold reaction to Joseph. It wasn't as though his anger had surprised her. She had even prepared herself for a confrontation, but he hadn't shown any interest in hearing her side. Clearly, he wanted nothing more to do with her. Maybe she and Charlotte had handled things wrong from the beginning. Maybe she should have just claimed Charlotte was a widow and told Cole about the baby in the very first letter. But at the time, it had seemed like too great a risk. They'd been so desperate and so sure this was the best option. And now Sophia was in a terrible mess. When morning came, Sophia still felt hopeless. She would have liked to stay hidden in her room a while longer, but Joseph needed to eat. It was still very early, but she hoped the housekeeper had already gone to the main house. She needed milk for Joseph. She'd already done enough exploring to know there was an icebox with milk, so she went to fill his bottle. Sophia was just sitting down to feed the baby when the housekeeper came into the kitchen. "You must be hungry," Mabel said. "You didn't eat last night, and I'm guessing you haven't eaten since the train ride." "I wasn't very hungry," Sophia admitted. "I'm guessing your milk hasn't come in. It happens sometimes when a new mother is under stress. A few good meals and some proper rest should move things along. We'll need to get you nursing as soon as possible for the baby's sake. Cow's milk is no substitute for mother's milk. It's no wonder the baby is on the fussy side." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. She'd wondered if Joseph's fussing was her fault, and hearing that it was because he couldn't nurse only added to her grief over Charlotte's death. Of course, Joseph needed more than she could offer. "No reason to worry," Mabel said. "We'll get you healthy enough to nurse in no time, and then you can start making your arrangements. I'm sure your sister will help you get back to New York." At the mention of her sister, Sophia finally broke into sobs. She couldn't keep up the deception any longer. What was the point in continuing with her lies? "Milk won't be coming. I won't be able to give Joseph what he needs. I'm not his mother. I'm his aunt. I'm not Charlotte either. I'm her sister, Sophia." "What?" "My sister, Charlotte was expecting. Charlotte was always a hopeless romantic. Aunt May managed to keep her in check, but after Aunt May died, Charlotte's desire to get married and the lack of suitors caused her to make some very poor decisions. I tried so hard to keep her from making a mistake, but she didn't listen to me. The man she thought loved her was our employer, and he didn't want to have anything to do with Charlotte once he found out about the baby. We both lost our jobs. We lost our home. We didn't know what to do. I thought if I could just find Charlotte a husband, she wouldn't have to worry about how to take care of the baby. I'm the one who found Mr. Williams' advertisement in the newspaper. The lies were all mine. I don't think Charlotte really thought it would work, but she was so frail. We couldn't afford a doctor. I failed her. "And where is your sister now, child?" Mabel asked, her voice as tender as Aunt May's always was whenever Charlotte or Sophia were upset about something as children. "She went into labor on the train. It was too soon. We thought we had more time. She didn't make it," Sophia said softly. "I hurt Mr. Williams. You must hate me." There's no denying your actions had an impact on Cole. He was smitten from the first letter, and I've never seen him more broken than he was last night. You made a very big mistake, but we tend to make those when we're desperate. You should talk to him. Explain the situation. He doesn't want to hear my explanation, and I think I've caused him enough problems. I should never have come. I should have found another way to look after Charlotte and Joseph. Maybe things would have turned out differently if Charlotte had given birth in New York. I've been on this earth a long time, and one thing I'm sure of more than anything else is that our days are numbered from the very beginning. Your sister is gone because her time had come. Don't add to your guilt by taking the blame for something you couldn't control in the first place, Mabel said, gently touching Sophia's shoulder. I have to get up to the house and start breakfast for the boys. You eat and try to rest while the baby rests. I'll come back this afternoon and we'll talk a little more. Life has a way of working out for the best. You're hurting too much to see it right now, but the right path will become much clearer once you've rested and had some time to grieve. Mabel left and Joseph had fed when Sophia tried to take Mabel's advice and rest with the baby. She was very tired, and she knew she needed to sleep a little before she would be able to come up with any kind of plan. Her heart was still very heavy, but it did ease her mind to tell the older woman the truth. Whatever came next, and wherever she and Joseph went, Sophia vowed to be honest. Little Joseph was depending on her, and she owed it to him to try to be the kind of role model Aunt May had been for her and Charlotte. Chapter 13. Cole didn't bother coming back to the house after finishing his morning chores. He didn't want to sit across the table from Mabel at breakfast. He figured she'd just look at him with pity in her eyes, and it wouldn't make him feel any better. She probably felt bad about insisting he find a bride through a newspaper advertisement. What a mistake he'd made listening to her on that one. Fulfilling his promise to his ma was important, but he'd do it another way and in his own time. At least Mabel would stop harassing him about a wife for a while. That was about the only bright spot he could see in this whole scenario. Cole would have stayed away until dinner had his stomach allowed, but working in the hot sun all day was hard enough without complicating matters with an empty belly. Lunch was already on the table when Cole took his seat. Mabel was looking at him, but he saw no pity reflected in her eyes. She looked rather angry. Cole thought about asking whether the girl had given her a hard time, but he didn't in all honesty want to know. Instead, he said grace and started piling his plate. "We need to have a talk," Mabel said before Cole could even take a bite. "I'm listening," Cole said evenly. He was concerned by her tone, but he knew he'd be better off letting her speak her piece sooner rather than later. "It's about your bride." "She's not going to be my bride, Mabel. I've already been made a fool of by that girl. I told her she could stay long enough to make other arrangements. If her presence in your house is too much of a problem, we'll just get her out of here sooner. I guess I should have asked you first. I'm sorry." "She's not the problem. She's a little lost lamb who needs mothering, and I won't have you rushing her away," Mabel said firmly. "I'm disappointed in you, Cole. You didn't even let the poor thing explain." What was there to explain? She lied. Yes, she did, but those two young women were desperate. I've been desperate myself. I don't know what would have happened to me if your parents hadn't hired me after Clovis died. It is scary to be on your own with no way to provide for your needs. She was wrong to lie to you, but a good man would have listened to her reasons before reacting. What was I supposed to do? She's an unwed woman with a baby, and she tried to trick me into marrying her and taking care of another man's child. That's not the kind of woman Ma and Pa would want me to marry. Mabel took her seat at the table and stared at Cole for a moment. Did you know the man who fathered that child was the girl's employer? He fired them both as soon as he learned Charlotte was carrying his baby. They lost their house. There wasn't enough money to see a doctor. Well, I'm sure that was a terrible situation, but it doesn't justify lying to me, Cole said. The baby was born on the train. It came early, Mabel continued. Charlotte died giving birth, but I met Charlotte last night, Cole said. You met Sophia. Sophia lost her sister just days ago, and she's taking care of her newborn nephew as her own, without even the natural means the good Lord intended for a mother. She posed as her sister because she didn't know where else to go. Yes, Cole, she lied to you, but she is a terrified young woman in a bad situation, and the decisions that led to little Joseph's birth weren't made by her. She only tried to help her sister. Now she's got a baby to raise and no family to help her do it. I wish she had told me the truth, Cole said, suddenly not nearly as hungry as he'd been a few minutes earlier. I'm sure she wishes she had been honest with you, too. My question to you is, what are we going to do now? Are we going to help this poor girl or not? Mabel asked. Cole looked down at his still full plate. Mabel was right. He'd been so angry, he hadn't thought about how bad things must have been for her to resort to deception. I'll talk to Sophia. We'll help her get on her feet. Good. That's what your parents would expect you to do, Cole. You have been blessed with a good life and all you need. The least you can do is help this poor girl who has come into our lives. Things happen for a reason, Mabel said before standing and walking over to the stove. When you talk to her, take her a plate. I'm sure she's hungry. Once Mabel finished serving a plate for Sophia, Cole dutifully took it to the little house. He knocked on the door, but Sophia didn't answer, so he went inside. Sophia, I brought lunch. Mabel explained things. I thought we should talk, he called out, but no one answered. Cole walked to the guest room and found the door open. The room was empty. He walked back towards the front of the house, stopping in the kitchen to put the plate on the table. That's when he saw it. There was a letter on the kitchen table, and it was addressed to him. Dear Mr. Williams, I have behaved very poorly. I should never have written to you in the first place. It was not Charlotte who started this deception. It was I. I wrote every letter, and I accepted your proposal on my sister's behalf. I hoped to find a suitable husband for my sister, but I did not take into account that a good wife would not lie to the man she intended to marry. I know my actions have caused you tremendous pain, and I shall always regret them. My sister, Charlotte, died in childbirth. I thought I could take her place and marry you so that Joseph would have a family. It was childish and naive. I understand that now. I know there is no way I can fully repay the cost of our train tickets at this time, so I have left most of our belongings and our trunks in the hopes that you can sell them to recoup a portion of the costs. When Joseph and I are settled and I have found employment, I will endeavor to repay the rest. Please thank Mabel for the kindness she showed me. Being able to finally tell the truth gave me the peace I needed to start again. I know you were willing to let me stay until I could make other arrangements, but you have suffered enough on my account. I will not ask you to put up with unwanted guests on your ranch just because I put you in a difficult position. Sincerely, Sophia Adams. Cole read the letter and frowned. The summer heat was too great for anyone to walk far, much less a city woman carrying an infant. He needed to find her as soon as possible and put matters to right. Mabel wasn't wrong about his parents. They would never turn away anyone in need. If he was honestly wanting to honor their memory, he had to fix this. Chapter 14. The heat was almost unbearable as Sophia carried little Joseph and their lone bag of possessions. It worried her that Joseph wasn't fussing. She was afraid he was getting too warm. She'd heard of sun sickness, and she knew the Montana summer was probably too intense for the baby. What was she to do? She couldn't stay where she wasn't wanted. If she could just make it to town and find work, maybe they would have a chance. Perhaps she could find a family willing to at least take in her nephew. He was such a tiny little thing. Maybe trying to raise him herself was a foolish notion. If she could find a family willing to take him, he wouldn't have to suffer with her. The thought of giving up her only family member was almost more than she could bear, but she'd do it if it meant a better life for him. Sophia, quite truthfully, didn't care what happened to her at this point. Joseph was all that mattered, and she'd already made a mess of his life in her attempts to save it. Finally, Sophia came upon a copse of trees. It was time to feed the baby, so she decided to sit under its shade with him. Maybe she could stay there until the heat of the day had passed. Leaning against the largest tree, Sophia pulled out the bottle and tried to get Joseph to eat, but he wasn't interested in the bottle. After several minutes of coaxing, Sophia became anxious. She was so overcome with emotion to even notice the horse and buggy approaching until it was right upon them. Her heart sank as Cole climbed down from the buggy and started walking in her direction. Sophia didn't have the strength for the argument she was certain was coming, but she couldn't exactly run with the baby. Steeling her nerves, she sat up a little straighter and waited. "It's awfully hot out here," Cole said, once he was standing beside her. "I guess summers probably don't get quite this warm in New York, so I can see why you'd think it was safe to walk to town. I'm not here to get on to you." Sophia relaxed slightly at his gentle tone. "It is warmer than I expected. I understand why you left. I wasn't really in much of a listening mood last night, but Mabel filled me in on your situation, Sophia. Lying isn't something I have much use for, but I guess I've never been in as tough of a spot. I don't honestly know what I'd have done, so it wasn't fair for me to judge you so harshly, especially when you needed my help. You had every right to be angry. I put you in an awful position," Sophia said, trying once again to get Joseph to eat. "He won't eat." Cole gently touched the baby's warm head. "Maybe it would be best if we get him back to the house. He'll probably perk right up when he cools down a little. If not, Mabel will know what to do." "I can't go back to the house with you. It wouldn't be fair under the circumstances. There's no money left. Going back to New York isn't really an option. If I can find work in town and maybe a good family who'll love Joseph, then I can start over. You shouldn't have to put up with us while I'm figuring a way out of the mess. It could take time." "You don't want to raise your nephew?" Cole asked. Sophia didn't bother wiping the tears from her eyes. "It isn't about what I want. I can't take care of him. He deserves more than I can offer him. When my parents died, we had Aunt May, and even without the inheritance my parents left behind, Aunt May was well established. She could take care of us and meet our needs. I can't do that for Joseph. What if you had a job that provided room and board and let you keep Joseph with you? Would you keep your nephew?" "Of course. He's my family. He's all I have left, and I am all he has. It's settled. Get in the buggy. You can work for me. Mabel is getting older. She could use some help keeping up the house, and I have a feeling she could use the company too. You can stay with her. She'll likely insist on it. I'll provide you a wage, so you shouldn't have any trouble taking care of the baby." Cole picked up her bag and started for the buggy. When Sophia didn't immediately follow, he turned around. "I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I treat my employees well. Mabel told me what happened with your previous employer. You don't have to worry. I expect you to help with the cleaning and the cooking. After what happened to your sister, I understand if you don't quite trust promises made by a would-be employer. I won't take advantage of your difficult predicament, but some people around here might see your situation as an opportunity for mischief. I really am your best option, Sophia, and I want to help." Sophia looked into Cole's eyes. She could see his sincerity. When he walked back to her and reached for the baby, she let him take him so that she could stand. "Let's get this little one home and settled. You and Mabel can work out the details of the chores later. It'll all work out. You aren't alone anymore." When they got back to the ranch, Mabel was waiting in the main house. She took one look at Joseph and started calling out orders. Cole, go to the well and bring me a bucket of water. Sophia, we need to get the baby out of these clothes and bathe him. No more running off, young lady. I said things would be clearer in time, and you just rushed off with no plan in place. There'll be no more of that nonsense. We take care of our own, and like it or not, that includes you now. Yes, Mabel, Sophia said. I'm sorry I worried you. Never mind that. Now undress the baby before Cole gets back, and I'll give him a bath while you eat your lunch. He'll be just fine once he's cooled down a bit. Once Joseph was cool, Mabel took a good long look at the bottle. Have you been feeding the baby straight cow's milk? Sophia nodded. It was all I could get for him. Mabel handed Joseph to Cole and took Sophia to the kitchen. I think he'll do better with bottle feeding if we make a few adjustments. Pour some milk into the pan and then add water to thin it. I'm going to put some sugar in and bring it to a boil. He should be able to tolerate the cow's milk better and not fuss quite so much. I didn't know, Sophia said, chastising herself for not realizing the milk was too hard for her newborn nephew to digest. How could you know unless someone told you? Don't stress, child. We'll get this little fellow lined out. He'll grow strong and healthy. You'll see. Once the bottle was ready, Mabel handed it to Sophia and had her sit in the most comfortable chair in the parlor. Cole smiled softly as he placed Joseph in her arms. Now let's see if this works a little better, Mabel said. When Joseph started to drink, the older woman smiled. He's just fine. He was a little warm and he needed a few adjustments to his milk. All first-time mothers make a few mistakes. There's a reason we older women are supposed to help and encourage you younger ones. I'll help you learn as you go. Sophia couldn't help but relax as Joseph suckled contently on the bottle. For the first time since Aunt May's death, she felt sure that she had help. Maybe all hadn't gone according to plan, but Charlotte's son still had a chance at a good life. Mapleview Ranch might just be the new start they needed after all. Chapter 15. Mabel insisted on Sophia taking Joseph to their little house once he was fed so that they could rest. Sophia hadn't been back at the house more than an hour when Cole knocked on the front door. He was carrying a small wooden cradle. I got this out of the attic. It's the one my ma used for me, and I'm sure she'd be pleased if you used it for Joseph. Would you like me to set it up in your room? Sophia looked at the cradle. It was a beautiful piece of hand-carved furniture, and she was certain she'd never seen one as nice even in the wealthiest homes back in Albany. It's so pretty, she said softly. Cole smiled. I'll take that as a yes. My pa made it himself when Ma was expecting. I think they were both disappointed when I was the only little one who ever got to use it. The little one will rest much better in his own bed, and I'd wager you'll sleep a lot better too. Are you sure you don't mind lending it to us? It's special. You should save it for your own children, she said, remembering that it had been Cole who first mentioned a family in their letters. Like you said, it's a loan. Letting this little one borrow it for a bit doesn't take anything away from my own children, and it helps you rest so you can help Mabel. Taking care of Mabel is my responsibility, kind of like taking care of Joseph is yours. The way I see it, we benefit from helping each other. Mabel may be a bit on the bossy side, but she and Tom are family. I wasn't kidding when I said she needed help around here. Sometimes I wonder if she was more anxious for me to get a wife for my sake or her own. Tom and I sure do make a lot of work for her. Sophia frowned slightly. I'm sorry I slowed down your search for a wife. Cole cleared his throat. I think we've made enough apologies in both directions, don't you? Let's just leave the past where it belongs and move forward. I'll go set up the cradle, and then I need to get back to the animals. Tom is probably beside himself with me having been gone so long. There's a cowbell by the back door of the house. Mabel will ring it when dinner's ready. You and the little one rest until it rings, and then come join us, and we'll all eat dinner together. Tomorrow, you can get started with your work. Sophia nodded, and Cole quickly put the cradle in its place. When he left, Sophia looked down at little Joseph. He was sleeping soundly, so she carried him to his new bed and placed him inside. Her heart suddenly felt very full as she remembered how worried she'd been about not being able to get whatever a baby might need. She placed a kiss on his little forehead and began to unpack her trunks. It felt good to have a home again. Dinner was a lively affair. Tom teased Cole unmercifully about leaving him to do the bulk of the work, and Mabel scolded both boys for putting their elbows on the table. "We have a lady present. You boys can't behave like hooligans at mealtime anymore. Sit up straight and mind your manners." When both men sat a little straighter in their chairs and removed their elbows from the table, Sophia had to stop herself from laughing out loud. It was obvious that Mabel ruled the roost, and Sophia was grateful that the older woman had decided to accept Sophia into their little family. The meal drew to a close, and Sophia found herself looking Cole over more closely. She'd never met a man as self-confident. He was also very handsome, but Sophia decided it would be best not to dwell on his outward appearance. Even if his dark hair did remind her of her father's, or if the dimple in his cheeks whenever he smiled made her heart beat just a little faster. He was a good man, and he would be a fine employer. Trosmal. Those were the traits she needed to focus on, and she intended to be the very best employee she could to thank him for his kindness. After the meal, Sophia helped Mabel clean the kitchen. "He's a good boy," Mabel said as she handed Sophia the last of the dishes. "Sometimes he needs a nudge or two in the right direction, but he tends to do right in the end. Looking after you and your nephew is the Christian way. I'm glad you weren't too stubborn to come back with him. You and the baby may not have been what we were expecting, but I have a feeling you were just what we needed." "I'll do my best to work hard and not be a burden," Sophia promised. "I'm sure you'll be plenty of help around here. Just don't forget to let us help you too. This is a family. It may not be the most traditional family, but it's a family all the same. Cole thinks it's his job to take care of us, but the way I see it, it's our job to look after him. He stepped into some big shoes when his father died. Besides running the ranch, he's tried to be the pillar in the community that his father was, and it was a lot of pressure for a man his age. Sometimes I think Cole thinks he's much older than 26, and I'd like to see him remember he's a young man. Maybe you can help him with that. Mabel, I'm here to help you. I assure you, I'm not here for any other purpose. Mr. Williams and I already discussed matters, and it will all be proper, I promise," Sophia said, suddenly feeling slightly defensive. "Mr. Williams died 3 years ago. I wouldn't recommend you call Cole by that name. I'm not suggesting romance, child. You don't need to worry about me getting any ideas about your intentions. I'm simply suggesting Cole could use a friend like you. You're here to help me, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, my biggest job is keeping Cole from staying so busy with his duties that he forgets to enjoy his life. If you want to help me, you'll be a good friend to Cole. He needs a friend like you, someone closer to his age to talk to about life. That is all I'm suggesting. Don't shut yourself off from friendship just because you are an employee on this ranch, or you may miss out on the best friend you could have." Sophia nodded. It was clear Mabel cared for Cole like a son. If Mabel's biggest worry was that Cole might be lonely and he needed a friend, then she would try to be a friend. Without Charlotte, she certainly needed a few friends in her life. Chapter 16. It wasn't as big an adjustment having Sophia and Joseph on the ranch as Cole expected. Sophia worked hard and tried to lighten Mabel's load, and Cole could tell that Mabel truly enjoyed mothering the young woman. Although Sophia had only been with them a few weeks, she already seemed to be a little less broken than she was when he found her sitting hopelessly under that tree. Cole found himself genuinely enjoying Sophia's presence. Sometimes he would sit with her in the parlor of the main house in the evening after dinner while she was feeding Joseph or sewing with Mabel. He had not sat in the parlor after dinner before her arrival on the ranch. He had always found distractions during the brief time before bed, but the manner with which Sophia managed to carry herself, even though she was so obviously hurting, made Cole want to be around her. On the morning of what Cole had thought would be his wedding day, he found Sophia alone in the kitchen cooking breakfast. "Are you ready for a cup of coffee?" she offered. I wouldn't turn down a cup. Where's Mabel this morning? She works so hard. I told her that I'd handle breakfast by myself today. I know I'm supposed to be lightening her load, but she's a little hard-headed, Sophia said, a smile playing on her lips. I'm not quite as good a cook, but hopefully you'll find it edible. Sophia quickly set the table. Where's Tom? He should be in shortly. We were up late with one of our heifers. She had her first calf, and it was a tough calving. Cole immediately noticed the change in Sophia's demeanor. He knew she was thinking about her sister. Everything turned out fine. He's just spending a little extra time in the barn. I didn't mean to dredge up any bad memories. I should have been more considerate. I'm glad you were able to get her through the night, Sophia said. It doesn't take much to make me think of Charlotte. Mabel says time will help some. You don't have to watch what you say around me. I know death is a fact of life. I need to get stronger and not let it affect me. I'm just not sure how. I think you're very strong. You're so young. You've lost so many people, but you keep going. You put others above yourself. Not many women in your position would have done all you did to take care of your sister, Cole said softly. Well, it's probably good they wouldn't, considering all the trouble I caused. Looking after Charlotte always seemed like my job. She was so naive, especially where romance was concerned. Charlotte made some poor choices, but her heart was always in the right place. Does it bother you to talk about her? He asked once Sophia took her place at the table. Not as much as I would have expected, she said. It seems like a lifetime has already passed, but I see her in Joseph. I'm so grateful he's here, even though he wasn't part of our plans. Charlotte always wanted to be a mother. I never had much inclination towards having a family, but I don't know what I would have done if I'd had to give him up. Sometimes I feel a little guilty for enjoying him so much. He was a gift. I'm glad you have a part of your sister with you. Even having Mabel, Tom, and now you and Joseph around, I sometimes miss my parents and that connection to family. It isn't easy. What do you do when the sadness hits you? Sophia asked. Cole smiled sadly. I guess it helps to talk about it like we're doing now. What are your plans for later today? I'm not sure. Mabel hasn't told me our schedule yet. We finished the laundry yesterday, and the baking is caught up. I'm sure she'll come up with something. She always has a project or two for us, Sophia said. I think sometimes she's just trying to keep me too busy to think. She's a good person. There's no denying that, Cole agreed. Today was the day I had planned for the wedding. Oh, Cole, I'm so sorry, and here I was going on and on about my loss. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was just stating a fact. You know, I only put out that advertisement to keep a promise to my ma. She wanted me married, and Mabel was bound and determined to make it happen. Cole smiled softly at Sophia. The only reason I mention it is because I think it might do us good to take the day off. Tom can handle the ranch, and I wouldn't mind making the trip into town. I know you could probably use a few things for the baby, and Mabel probably has a list of her own. Would you like to go into town with me? We could stop at the general store and get supplies for the house. Sophia didn't answer right away. Cole could tell she was thinking it over, and he found himself desperately hoping she would say yes. The longer she waited before responding, the more he worried she might be getting the wrong idea. If you'd be more comfortable going with Mabel, I can hook up the wagon for you, and she's pretty comfortable with the horses. It isn't that. I was just thinking, I'm not sure I want to take Joseph out in the heat. After last time, Sophia was interrupted by Mabel, who had stepped into the kitchen unnoticed. I agree, Sophia. The baby doesn't need to be out in the heat. He'll stay here with me, and you will go to town with Cole. I usually make a trip around this time of the month to get supplies, but you're young and spry. I think I'll turn the shopping duties over to you. Mabel, don't you think it would be a little inappropriate for Cole to be seen unchaperoned with a woman? Sophia asked. It would probably be much better for his reputation if you went instead of me. Mabel laughed. Oh, child, if anything, being seen in town with a pretty young woman will help Cole's reputation, and it won't hurt yours any as long as Cole has you back here before dark. If anyone has anything to say about the matter, they'll have to answer to me. I've made my decision. Shopping will be your job. Now go get ready to leave, and I'll clean up the kitchen once I've fed this little angel his bottle." Sophia nodded and made to get ready, leaving Cole alone with Mabel in the kitchen. "She's a good girl, Cole," Mabel said. "I think your ma would like her." "I'm glad she's such a good help to you. I suppose I should have hired you some help a long time ago. I'm sorry I didn't think of it," Cole said, taking his final swig of coffee. He didn't bother admitting he was pretty sure his ma would like Sophia too, and he certainly wasn't going to admit that he was fond of the woman who had come into his life and turned it upside down in an instant. After all, he had promised Sophia he wouldn't take advantage of his position as her employer. "She's a pretty young woman too, but I'm sure you haven't noticed," Mabel said, and Cole could feel his ears burning. He had certainly noticed, but he wasn't about to admit it to Mabel. "If you take her into town, there's a good chance some of the young men will want to start calling. I suppose we won't have her with us long. A woman of her character and beauty won't have any trouble finding a husband if she is so inclined." Cole didn't like the direction the conversation was going. The idea of Sophia and Joseph leaving the ranch didn't sit well with him, and the idea of one of the men from town taking them away bothered him more than he was willing to admit. "Do you think she'd be interested in any of the fellows around here?" "Prosody. I think she's a beautiful young woman who deserves to be loved and cherished. We'd be doing her a disservice if we stood in the way of her finding happiness, and since you and Tom have no interest in her, we should hope she finds a special someone." Cole went to hook up the wagon, but he couldn't get Mabel's words out of his head. He did have an interest in Sophia. If he were being honest, his interest in her was probably more than just a casual one. He was pretty sure he was falling in love with her. The trip to town didn't take too long, but Cole and Sophia talked and laughed the entire way. Cole found himself hoping Sophia's candidness meant she might have feelings at least a little similar to his own. While Sophia handed Mabel's list to the man behind the counter, Cole walked down the aisles. He found a silver brush and mirror set, and he couldn't help but imagine Sophia using the brush on her auburn hair, so he picked it up and set it on the counter. "We'll take this too," he said. Sophia gave him a puzzled look, but said nothing as they collected their items and left. When they got into the wagon, Cole handed her the brush and mirror. "I know you haven't been able to get anything for yourself in quite some time. It isn't much, but I thought, Cole, I can't accept this. I already owe you so much, and this isn't the type of gift an employer should give," Sophia said. "I guess it probably isn't, but I seem to have developed a problem over these past few weeks. I think I may have started having some feelings for one of my employees that an employer probably ought not to have, and I was hoping she might have some of those feelings too," Cole said, suddenly worried he had overstepped. Sophia smiled mischievously. "I'm not sure Mabel feels the same way." Cole smiled back. "I wasn't talking about Mabel. Is there any chance you might feel anything for me? I know we agreed you would work for me, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. If you don't, then I promise I won't ever mention it again. But I've been accused of waiting too long in the past. I'd hate for another man to express his intentions before I express mine." "Your intentions?" "When I first saw you, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. I thought you were my fiancé, and I felt like I had just been given the most wonderful gift. When things didn't turn out the way I planned, I reacted badly, but we managed to become friends. Now that I know you better, I see my first reaction was the right one. You are as beautiful inside as you are on the outside, and I think I have fallen in love with you. I don't want you to marry some man from town. I want you to marry me." Sophia blinked. "You want to marry me after everything I did?" "I do, but I don't want you to feel like you have to marry me. I only want you to marry me if you feel the way I feel." Sophia smiled. "I never wanted to marry at all, but I never planned to fall in love either. I think I love you too, Cole. You're kind and patient. You take care of those around you, and you always try to do what's right. I would love to be your wife if you honestly want to marry me." "I do," Cole said, taking her hand in his own. "I want to marry you. I want us to build a life together. I want us to raise Joseph as our son." Cole and Sophia returned to the ranch and gave Mabel the good news. She didn't seem surprised in the least. Well, Cole, you're finally keeping your promise to your ma. You chose very wisely. Now, let's get with the pastor and set a wedding date as soon as we can. Our family is finally as it should be. I knew from my first conversation with Sophia that you'd finally met your match. You just needed a little time and prodding to get there. Slucidity. So all that talk about the men from town was just to speed things along? Cole asked. I could see the love growing between you and I. Didn't want you to waste any more time, Mabel said. Sophia, I told you that you weren't what we expected, but you were what we needed. Nothing makes me happier than knowing you and Joseph will be a permanent part of our family. Mabel hugged them both. Now, I've cooked a special dinner. We're going to celebrate. Mabel went back into the kitchen to finish setting the table, and Sophia looked at Cole and smiled. I think she just played matchmaker. Cole smiled at his fiancée. I sure am glad she did. Without her prompting and your persistence in answering my advertisement to find your sister a husband, I'd never have met the love of my life. And I wouldn't be exactly where I belong. Thank you for rescuing me, Cole. I do love you, and I can't wait to be your wife.